The punishment wasn't the worst part. It was what Hamilton said after. On Friday in Spa, Lewis Hamilton didn't just spin. He sent a message, a quiet, coded signal that something inside Ferrari is breaking. When the cameras cut to silence, the radio was screaming regret. "I spun," he told the media. Cold, flat. Then came the real line, the one that changed everything. "It's the first time in my career." No engineer defended him. No one debriefed in public. The new suspension, the promised upgrade, all left unspoken. Hamilton had carried Ferrari's hopes into Belgium. They handed him instability. And then Saturday came. Another Q1 exit. Another wound. Another apology. "I'm really sorry," he whispered. But to whom? The team. Or the version of himself that trusted them. It wasn't the spin that alarmed those watching from behind the curtain. It was the fact that Hamilton, master of control, architect of precision, had reached the point where the car disobeyed him entirely. And in the Ferrari garage, no one blinked. This wasn't just a technical failure. It was a psychological break. And Hamilton felt it before the car even snapped. In SQ1, his first lap was messy, unsettled. But instead of recalibrating, he was told to push. And he did. Into the final chicane. Into the spin. Into the silence. What made it worse wasn't the mistake. It was the reaction, or lack of one. Riccardo Adami, the engineer supposedly guiding him through this transition to red, stayed quiet. There was no calming voice, no strategic adjustment, no protection. Just radio static and a driver left exposed. Meanwhile, on the other side of the garage, Leclerc quietly secured P4. The gap to pole, 0.710. The same upgrade Hamilton said changed nothing had supposedly brought clarity to Charles. How? How does one car spiral and the other stabilize? Inside Maranello, someone already knows the answer. But no one is speaking, at least not on record. Ferrari claimed this weekend would mark a turning point, a new suspension, a better balance, a united push. But Spa exposed the lie. If this was unity, it came with conditions. Hamilton, after months of adaptation, had been promised a breakthrough. Instead, he found a car that punished every risk and a team that let him carry the blame. Massively frustrated, he admitted. But the deeper wound was trust. And it showed: the setup, Leclerc's upgrade, Leclerc's feedback, the silence, Adami, and Hamilton. He became the test subject in someone else's experiment. A champion left to improvise. When he crossed the line and saw his lap deleted for track limits, Radalon, of all places, it was more than just an error. It was a rupture. Back-to-back Q1 exits. Career firsts. Not because of pace alone, but because of something more dangerous: disconnection. Not from the car, from the people managing it. This wasn't Spa's chaos. This was Ferrari's control strategy misfiring. Again. We've seen this before, just not with Hamilton. Sebastian Vettel knows the pattern. A setup that favors one driver, a silent engineer during crisis, apologies in public, but none in the garage, and then the slow leak of trust that becomes irreversible. Hamilton isn't naive. He didn't expect perfection in year one. But what he didn't expect was a team so rehearsed in silence. At Mercedes, failure was shared. At Ferrari, failure is isolated. And in Spa, Hamilton stood alone. And yet, even as the media swarmed, he didn't lash out. He didn't accuse. He looked into the cameras and said, "Tomorrow is a new day." Not because he believed it, but because someone in that garage had to show leadership. And it wouldn't be coming from the pit wall. Behind closed doors, the murmurs have started. The new components aren't reacting as expected, but only on one side of the garage. Adami, under pressure, avoids giving full clarity on radio. And Leclerc? Protected. Stable. Unquestioned. It's not sabotage. It's worse. It's systemic. Hamilton's body language after the spin said more than the broadcast ever could. No hand wave. No anger. Just a slow walk back. Eyes down, shoulders square. It wasn't shame. It was calculation. He knows what these moments reveal. Every camera in Spa caught Leclerc chatting with his engineer, deconstructing data, adjusting with calm precision. But Hamilton? There was no post-session dialogue. No visible engineer engagement. as if Ferrari had already decided where the problem was, not in the system, but in the driver. But Hamilton isn't new to this dance. At Mercedes, he built a culture of accountability. At Ferrari, he's encountering a culture of deflection. The same car that was supposed to lift him collapsed under pressure, and the garage looked away. And that's when he spoke. Not on the radio, not to Adami, to the press. First time in my career. That line wasn't about the spin. It was a message. What happened at Spa wasn't just technical. It was historical. And something inside this team is drifting far from where he intends to lead it. The line echoed through the paddock, like a quiet alarm. First time in my career. Hamilton doesn't throw those words lightly. They're loaded, deliberate, and they cut deeper than any headline, because behind that phrase is a truth Ferrari cannot ignore. Lewis Hamilton, the most experienced driver on the grid, just lived a failure that his two-decade career had never produced. And it happened under their watch. At Mercedes, such a line would have triggered an emergency debrief. At Ferrari, it triggered nothing. No press release. No engineer interview. No damage control. Just the same thin optimism. Tomorrow is another day. But tomorrow doesn't fix a system that's misfiring from within. And Hamilton's apology, that wasn't submission. It was responsibility. The kind Ferrari's leadership has rarely shown. He took the blame publicly, so the team wouldn't fracture further in private. But the message was sent. He sees the cracks. And he's keeping score. What comes next isn't about redemption on Sunday. It's about control. And whether Hamilton still believes this is a project he can command, or one he's being used by. What no one dares to say inside Ferrari is what rivals already whisper. The SF-25 is splitting in two. Not mechanically,